Alright boys, today we are trying this new overlay. Trying to be better with my brake control. And one thing that's been coming up for me recently is the US versus Japan, because first time I actually wanted to go to Japan was early 2020. I had planned a trip, I think it was end of January. And it's before lockdown occurred here in the US, but things were raging in Asia. And I had planned a trip. I was actually the one who was the most excited to go to Japan, so I had planned a trip for myself and I think 4 or 5 friends. And the funny thing was, because I have some medical conditions that put me on a medication that is an immunosuppressive agent, both me and my doctor decided that it would probably be safest for me not to go, which was painful because I was so excited to go. Like a lot of you guys, been a huge Japan fan ever since, you know, the 90s golden era of the Japanese sports car and Initial D and things like that. So it was painful. But in 2024, Cherry Blossom, I went for the first time. And it was absolutely incredible. Now, Japan is not perfect. Don't have to look too far. There are YouTube videos, news articles, Reddit posts, etc. about some of the issues with Japan and its culture. But there are times when I think, when I reminisce fondly, let's say, about what Japan offers, that's harder to find in the US. So I think a lot of us tend to prefer the car culture and the car scene in Japan. I can speak for myself and a few friends who say that they prefer Japanese cars and oftentimes various types of European cars over American cars. I felt this way for a long time, ever since I was a kid, because American cars were always kind of big and heavy and focused on power. They were never very light. They didn't have that same level of delicacy, and I think in recent years there have been more and more compelling American cars that do actually tick those boxes that weren't ticked before. If you guys follow my other channel, Jabal and Cars, you'll see my review of the Mustang GT350R, which was one of my all-time favorite American cars. A true, proper sports car. And even the Corvette Z06, the first example of a Z06 I drove, was actually a bit, yeah, I guess disappointing. It's probably the right word. But I found out that it was just the setup of that car, the modifications the owner had done, that really changed the way it drove. And that by driving some other examples since then, I'm actually going to appreciate the car much, much more. Wah, wah, wah. Now, I liked Japan so much when I went in spring, cherry blossom season, March, April of 2024, that I went again in November of 2024 for my birthday. And then I went again February of 2025 just for shits and giggles to do more car stuff and film more car content. And it was an absolute blast. Loved it. I'm now going again to Japan in the spring, and again, Japan's not perfect, but there are things that I miss sometimes when I'm here in the US. So one thing that was coming up yesterday is actually in the Japanese culture, from what I've seen, because again, I am no Japan expert, so for those who disagree with me or have more expertise and experience, then please do correct me and leave a comment below. But there tends to be much more attention paid to being considerate of others, right? So in public places, you're not going to be talking loudly or playing stuff on your phone. you're going to be more mindful that there are other people that probably want some peace and quiet from your music or from your loud conversations or your yelling and whatever else. And yesterday, I went to a new gym that opened up recently near my house. It's always nice when a new gym opens up because the equipment is all clean and works properly and there are no issues. And the sauna is a lot cleaner and a lot less stinky. And when I got to the sauna, I was pleasantly surprised that there were only 2 people. I was like, hell yes, because it's never pleasant when you have like 8 people in a small sauna at the gym. There were only 2 people. I guess actually it was 3 people. And things initially seemed fine. But in the US, because there isn't that same focus on being considerate and such, after a couple of minutes, one of the gentlemen started doing a lot of exercises very loudly. Like, if you want to do your own stuff, that's cool, but you know, when you're making a lot of grunts and you're doing exercises, squats and ab stuff, and you know, jumping around all across this small sauna, it is a little bit disruptive to the other people in there. And also starting to sing along or rap along to your music. I was just like, oh boy, like this is a unique experience, and got me thinking to the onsens in Japan, where you don't really have to deal with that. People just kind of sit in there respectfully, quietly. People aren't wearing shoes because that's what you're supposed to do, right? Sanitary reasons. But in the US, people do wear shoes, so you're not supposed to, but I actually will wear shoes as well because I don't want to get foot fungus from the less than hygienic practices that you'll see in the US saunas. So I do just wear shoes or shower slippers or whatever rather than going barefoot. And then the other 2 gentlemen are talking, you know, very like yelling at each other. I'm like, guys, we're like in a small, not even 10 by 10 sauna right now. It just got me thinking, like, oh man, Japan, and in Japan this kind of stuff would never happen. And not everyone actually likes that, because I've talked to another friend who said the first time he went to Japan, he found it depressing. He's like, dude, everyone here just seems like they're dead. They're all so quiet. No one's really talking to each other, and they don't seem happy. And it's about how you grow up and your values and your perception of the world, because to me, I never picked up on that. I was like, oh wow, they're just considerate and kind, and you know, when I'm in a plane, as an example, I feel very awkward if I have anything playing on the phone speaker. And I will put on headphones or silence my phone because I don't want to be the person that has their music or their podcast out on speaker. But I'd say probably around 20 to 30% of the flights that I go on, I do have the experience of having someone nearby playing something loud on their phone, and someone else or myself will politely ask them, hey, like, do you mind please putting on headphones? And the flight attendants will actually now also make an announcement at the beginning, like, hey, if you are playing something on your phone, we ask you to just use your headphones. And I mean, the fact that people feel comfortable doing that, I don't feel any discomfort or awkwardness or cringe or shame themselves when they do it, I think is very telling that the culture here is very different than in Japan. Now, not everyone in Japan is necessarily going to be like that, but it is far more common to be mindful and quiet and considerate in Japan than in the US. Which to some people like me is a big pro, and to other people like my friend who said this is depressing, especially a con. They want something a little bit more lively and loud and fun and, you know, more aligned with their own values and their upbringing. The other thing that really resonates with me with Japan is actually how there's this pride in doing things right. It's not enough just to do the job, but you have to do it to the best of your ability. And that really has always resonated with me quite deeply. Even in school, you know, most people don't really care about school and projects and such, but I always felt some level of pride and wanting to do my best work when I was in grade school or in college or in med school. And I think that's part of the reason why in Japan I feel very much understood, or that at least that part of the culture resonates with me. Dude, I'm driving hella slow. My PB is a 157.5. I'm more than a second off my own pace. But that pride and that attention to detail and that care in doing things to the best of your ability shines through across cars, across food, across many things, across engineering. And I think it gives a sense of like joy and pleasure in some of the more mundane things. Like when you drive a well-tuned, well-designed Japanese sports car, if you're anything like me, you think, wow, this, like, the inputs of the Honda EK9 that I drove near, or on Hakone Skyline, near Mount Fuji, with Mount Fuji in the backdrop, just super picturesque. I was like, dude, this is just what dreams are made of. This car has these beautiful inputs, this amazing rev-happy engine, this, you know, it has the double wishbone suspension. It's just so, it's made without compromise. And I was, growing up as a kid, always one of these rear-wheel drive purists. I thought that, you know, front-wheel drive was always inherently worse. And I've driven many FL5s and DC, you know, DC5s, or sorry, DE5s. There's only the DC2 and the EK9, more so than any FL5 or FK8 or DE5 that really spoke to me in terms of how the car drove. That's a whole nother conversation though. And yes, that pleasure in doing things right. And going back to these cars, they all have this beautiful balance of inputs and weighting, and if you pay attention to the details and the subtleties, there's this beautiful tuning and pleasure in the details that I think is lost when you just sledgehammer like the American way, you know. I think in America, when it comes to cars, it's just like more power, more weight, more displacement, and you lose some of that nuance, that detail. It also comes across in the food, right? American food tends to be a lot more about these strong, bold flavors. Think about, you want coffee, you want soda, you want burgers and french fries. You want these very powerful olfactory and culinary and, you know, gustatory experiences. Whereas in Japan, it's a lot more subtle. And rather than hitting you over the head with a sledgehammer, it's more about drawing out the essence of that ingredient, or very intentionally creating a kind of experience when you are eating that is not just one-dimensional or overpowering, but is instead trying to find this middle ground with a great deal of intentionality. I'm driving like Shiza, dude. At least my safety rating is up to a 3.41. I'm trying to get to C class. I'm currently D class. Haven't been doing enough sim racing, so once I get to C, I think I can do Porsche Cup, which is, I feel like I want to do mostly Miata and Porsche Cup these days, but I can't do Porsche Cup until I get to C license. when I go to Japan later this year, I'm going to be trying some new cities. I've only ever done, really, Tokyo, Kyoto, and Nagoya in the past. But this time I'm also going to try Osaka and Fukuoka. So far, I've loved every city I visited. Nagoya, I didn't really get to explore much because I was really just sleeping there for the Japanese Grand Prix, Formula One, and for that reason, didn't really get to explore the city much. Just left there early in the morning, came back later in the day, rinse and repeat for a couple days. Let's go to a new session. But yeah, the whole being considerate thing, I've always found so interesting because I think it's primarily based on how you were raised. There might be some genetic component. Oh, doing the autosave. I think we can skip. I don't need to save that replay. So since that has ended, let's try this one. Yeah, so I think it's mostly upbringing, right? Because based on how I was brought up, actually that's not even true because I can think of my brother being different from me in this way. I was going to say that this is primarily upbringing and culture and things like that because you feel awkward, you feel uncomfortable, you feel bad if you are inconveniencing other people. And that's not to say again that everyone in Japan is like this and everyone in the US is not, and vice versa. It's just trends and averages. Remember when I was in high school, there would be some people that would go on the bus, that would take the bus to and from school, and there's some people who just like blast music on their phones or on their little Bluetooth speakers, and the rest of us in the back would just like roll our eyes and be like, wow, that's pretty douchey. And so not everyone is like that in the US, right? But there's a greater proportion of people, and I do think it's largely cultural, but then you do get into the whole question of like genetics and such. Maybe if you are more anxious and more worried about what other people think, which can be partially genetic, of course, then maybe you are more likely to not want to do that and not bother other people, as an example. Just a thought. Going back to the food, one of my favorite restaurants here in the US, here in Las Vegas, is actually Japanese, and it's a yakitori spot. And very simple ingredients, right? You're eating different parts of chicken or of various vegetables, and just the care they put into cooking them. They'll use these small scissors and cut off the burnt or charred parts of that piece of food as they put it over the binchotan charcoal. And you feel again that delicacy, that precision, that intentionality and pride in the work, even when you have a very simple food, these various skewers. I think a lot of people in the US also tend to like sushi, although have to be mindful of raw fish and parasites and things like that. But I love sushi too. I feel like going to Japan has actually spoiled me because now... Actually, it's not even just going to Japan, because even before I went to Japan, as I was getting older, I just found myself feeling a little bit more sick at certain sushi spots where I didn't before, like in my 20s. So I think part of it too is that you're just not as resilient and you're perhaps a bit more sensitive as you get older. A lot of the sushi in the US, not as high of quality, and I'll sometimes get some nausea afterwards. Same with some of the people that I eat with. Student driver, that's funny.
Yeah, right. Clear.
I'm currently not using that mirror right here or the radar because I'm trying to just practice using the mirror, you know, the various mirrors in a real car to make it as realistic as possible, but I'm not sure if I should be doing that or not. I hear mixed things. Try experimenting with both, honestly. I think back to that sauna, like if I was the other dude, just like, he was sitting chilling for a little bit and then all of a sudden he got up and just like started going ham on some exercises and being hella loud. Like if I was him, I would personally feel so uncomfortable doing that. But again, we're all wired differently. I'm guessing that guy was also American. I'm American. And I guess that quietness, that silence in Japan comes off to me less as depression and less as like these people are unhappy and more just, okay, let's all be mindful of each other and let's not bother each other. I remember one time I was on the subway and this guy was rocking a Rolex Explorer and it was pristine. Maybe it was a new watch, but part of me also just got the sense that he was the kind of guy that just took care of his things and didn't want to scrape it up, scuff it up, and that's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. I think that the way I was raised, where there was a little bit more scarcity, I'm like, hey, if you break this thing, you're not getting a replacement. I was very precious with many of my belongings, and they would last long, and I didn't have to buy new ones, and you know, I took care of them, but there was like added stress in doing so. And I think there's actually something to not letting your things own you. But at the same time, like, you want to take decent care of your stuff and have it last. You know what I mean? Whiffed that corner. So yeah, this guy who had this pristine watch, I had just got my Grand Seiko Shunbun SGBA 443, which is essentially identical to the US's 413, I believe. And I remember thinking like, wow, I want to take good care of this watch as well. And then you have to be mindful of it, right? You don't want to like be knocking it against things, but you also don't want to be so stressed out that you are afraid to wear it. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things that you want to be intentional with. You don't want to go too far in one extreme, is the way I view it. When I had my Scion FRS, I would just I'd really baby it because it meant so much, and it was, you know, my first car and all these things. And then at a certain point I was like, wait, hold on a second, why am I babying this car and hand washing it myself and doing the 2-bucket method and getting the front end, you know, with PPF and all that stuff? Like, this is just a Scion FRS, and I'm going to sell it eventually. I'm not going to keep it for the rest of my life, even though a lot of us when we're younger, we think that we are. And eventually, during COVID, actually, I saw it as a tool to bring me happiness. And I was like, you know what, I need to... Oop, almost money shifted that. And when I say tool to bring me happiness, it was easier for a couple reasons. Number one, COVID was raging. And I was like, hey, you know, I don't know how long any of us are going to live. Like, health is fragile. And secondly, it was actually the best year I've had with my business. And it felt a lot easier to not be precious with something when you feel like you can replace it in case something were to happen. But that was a great year. I started doing track days for the first time back in 2020. I did only one that year. And I didn't even do my next track day until 2022 for whatever reason in 2021. Whichever track day I had was canceled due to some California fires and such, and
Car 10, just left the Buckner flat, 59.392.
so when it came to that car though, it was liberating to not be taking it so seriously, to not be so precious with it. And I got much more enjoyment. I put on like 30,000 miles in a single year. By the time I sold it, I only had 75, 77, a little bit less than 80,000 miles. So I put a lot of miles in that 1 year because I didn't have, I didn't want to fly. And I was going to various cities, driving my car, road tripping, which I could do back then, 29 years old, but now I don't think I could do any road trips in a Scion FRS. The road noise, the ride comfort, I'm too old for that. I also don't know why it doesn't show other people's I rating.
Fleet car ahead.
It shows their safety rating. A little bit too hot, missed the apex. Overslowed on that. I need to work on this corner. I feel like every lap I lose so much time there. I don't know what I did in the past, but I lose so much time compared to my best. I think what I'm going to start doing on this channel is using it as like a brainstorming session. I'm only doing this with friends, but even solo I can just ramble as I am right now and get ideas for other videos that I may want to make on my main Jabal and Cars channel. 2/10 down to optimal. I keep fucking up that turn, man. Should have braked a little bit earlier and got on the gas a little bit earlier. Would have had a better exit on this long ass straight. It's okay, we're still in the 157 at least.
You just hit the fastest lap.
The whole idea of like taking pride in your work, I think, is something that is so foreign, pun intended, because in the US you are standing out if you are that kind of person. And I think as a result it's actually easier, I'd say, in the US to stand out in certain endeavors. Because when fewer people are giving it their all, fewer people are trying as hard as you, when you just put in more effort, it's a lot easier to stand out. My main businesses are focused on medical education, and I'm oftentimes working with students and such that want to intern or, you know, get involved, get some experience, and it's always surprising to me how such a large portion of them will make excuses when I give them a trial task and give them some deadlines, like, oh, you know, had a family emergency. It's like, well, are we really all just having family emergencies at the same time? Is it really just that bad of luck? Or are people making excuses because they agreed to a deadline, procrastinated on it, and then when it got too close, oops, they had to make an excuse of, you know, family emergency. So that kind of stuff, just by under-promising, over-delivering, giving it your all, having integrity, doing what you say, saying what you'll do, doing the right thing, that already makes you stand out quite a bit. It's quite shocking. Now, there are downsides to some of the benefits I talked about Japan, right? The whole two-faced, you know, smile to your face, talk shit behind your back, people feeling that it's hard to really connect, and people tend to be a little bit more fake and outwardly polite. I also don't honestly like that. Since I've only been visiting as a tourist and not really making any friends there, I haven't experienced that myself yet, or at least not been aware of it, I should say. I'm sure that as a dumb tourist, I probably did a lot of faux pas that the locals there were probably polite to me and were simultaneously thinking, wow, what an idiot American. But other than committing those unintentional faux pas, why'd it get choppy there? Maybe that's just that screen. Still, yeah, I think it's just that screen. And that's very much not aligned with what I like. I am a very direct communicator. I like direct feedback. I like telling people just like it is and not sugarcoating things, and I prefer both giving and receiving in that way, but not everyone does. last few races my I rating has shot up because I kept placing P1, P2, and then a P3. Mostly because I just didn't want the guy behind me with a low safety rating to knock me out, because I'm trying to farm safety rating more so than increase I rating right now. But I think a large part of that increase has just been the fact that I've been actually practicing these tracks more. In the past I would only do sim racing 30 minutes per week, which is nothing. There's like a learning curve to just get acquainted with sim racing and to get the car to do what you want in this virtual world, because real life stuff is of course very different. And I know multiple people who are phenomenal drivers in real life. They come into the sim and it's like they're learning how to drive for the first time. And if you don't give yourself enough time to really adjust to that, and maybe you spend an hour but then you take off a month and you come back, it's like you're relearning it again and again and again, and you can't actually improve. So I remember getting quite frustrated for quite some time, but this last Christmas, just a week or two ago, I said, you know what? I need to start doing this sim racing. I need to start streaming it. Streaming is actually the way that I'm keeping myself more accountable. By trying to stream more often, I find myself on the rig more often. And I'm seeing improvement, you know? The car is more frequently doing what I want it to do. Not always still. Need to control my inputs, especially my braking, get better resolution. Also curious to hear what you guys think of the POV setup. I know most streamers have a camera on their face. The reason I wanted to do POV is because it just keeps it consistent with the main car channel. It's what people are used to seeing. But admittedly, the camera setup does eventually add a lot of pressure to my forehead. And after about an hour or so, I need to take it off because it just hurts too much. Could have gone down to first, actually. There we go, that's a better exit. Much worse entry though. Look at how much further down I am, 1.3 seconds back, but okay, 158.1. Totally blew that. carry more speed. Wiedemann too low over there.
You got about 5 laps of fuel left.
Never run out of fuel before on iRacing. Is the car just stop? I'm guessing so. Go for realism. That was sloppy. Dude, sim racing is such a humbling hobby. Because you're now comparing yourself against other people throughout the world. And here I am with something like a 1680 or something on my I rating, which is nothing, right? You look at these aliens with 8,000 plus, and the skill that they have when they drive is otherworldly, really. The consistency, the control, and I guess there needs to be a belief that you can improve. Within reason, right? Like, no matter how much I practice, I'm never going to be Max Verstappen or anywhere close to that. But it got me thinking. I have a friend who I attend track days with, and he was telling me about some of the other track day attendees, and how, oh, this guy here, this guy there, they're just aliens, like, there's no point even trying to be like them because they're just built different or whatever. And I talked to some of these really fast drivers, and more often than not, they were fortunate to have access as kids to go-karts and do some, racing in their youth, which is incredible because you build that skill set, and while your brain and your body is developing, you're actually creating these novel neural connections that strengthen your skill around go-karting and eventually track day driving and racing and things like that. And you can control a car far better than people that start later. Like, let's say you have 1,000 hours as a child versus 1,000 hours as an adult. The child is generally going to have a much higher skill set and retain that versus the adult that spends the same amount of time. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, to be like, okay, the people that are go-karting from when they're 5 years old, 6 years old, I'm probably never going to get to that level. Or at least it'll take me a lot longer than it ever took them to get to that level. But I don't think that means you have to completely give up on the hope of being a better driver and getting close to that level. I think you need to have some level of self-belief that you can get better. Otherwise, you're going to just stay stuck where you are, right? don't be so delusional that you quit your day job and say, I'm going to be a professional esports driver and I'm going to go into Formula One. Like, you know, there's a middle ground here where you're not so delusional that you're harming yourself, but you also have the self-belief and maybe a little bit of overconfidence at times to say, hey, I can do this, I can improve, I can get to where I want to be. And I feel like, even though I'm quite new to sim racing still, I think in real life on track days, I do think I'm a much better driver now compared to when I first started in 2020. Like, I think it's a night and day difference. And I still have a lot to improve on. But I'm also getting to the point where now I cringe a lot less when I watch some of my own laps, at least in my own car. When I review other people's cars, I'm going to go way slower and way more conservative. But in my own car, there's a video that I'm currently in the process of editing with my team that will go live from Laguna Seca, and I set a PB, and I was like, you know what, that was actually a good set of 4 laps where in each of the 4 laps I was just getting a little bit faster, a couple tenths, and over the course of those laps I shaved off a second or 2 off of my prior PB. Actually more than that, because I also had new tires, plus better driving. And it was cool, it was a lot of fun. One of my buddies, who I track with a lot and who has helped me a lot understand how to be a better driver and just give me tips, done a lot of ride-alongs with them, he's done more than 200 track days. And when I asked him how many track days he thought I had done, he guessed 100. And I was flattered. I was like, hey man, that's I appreciate that. I've actually only done like 30. And I'm not gonna lie, that gassed me up a little bit, but then when I told him 30, he's like, oh yeah, actually I can see that. I was like, yeah, ouch. Because there's a very different level of not only experience and knowledge, but also driving when you're driving 200 track days versus just 30. I imagine that hopefully at track day number 200, I'm a completely different driver from where I am today at track day number something like 32 or something like that. I know at the beginning of this year I was like 20 or 25. Now I'm somewhere around 30 or 32. I think doing some iRacing, practicing certain techniques, driving different cars, like I do review a lot of GT Porsche, so then practicing some Porsche GT car in iRacing, you know, it's not going to be the exact same, this is like an actual cup car. You know, I think that can actually improve my skill set, expand the repertoire so that when I'm driving these other cars I feel more comfortable behind the wheel, really, is what it comes down to. Alright, I want to let the fuel completely die and see what happens. I'm gonna go full empty. Does it sputter a little bit? Does it die immediately? I'm gonna get towed. I'm curious. Go pit, or I could see what happens. So, in terms of improvement, how do you improve at something in the fastest way possible? I think a lot of the principles that apply to learning in school, we call that semantic knowledge, when you can actually recite facts. I think a lot of those things actually translate to learning a skill, procedural knowledge, golf swing, driving, etc. I think one of the core things is having humility to say, I don't know everything. I think a lot of guys are a little bit overconfident in their own driving skills. Oh, there we go, now the fuel's cutting.
Looks like you're out of gas.
Let's see, can I make it to the pit? You know, it's funny, I actually was writing passenger on a trip to Vegas in college where we had like a dance competition, and the guy failed to realize that he was out of gas, and when he realized he was out of gas, he still was flooring it, like overtaking and weaving. I was like, bro, you do realize that right now we're trying to find a gas station, and you redlining it and driving aggressively is actually consuming more fuel. But he actually didn't realize that, and we ended up getting stranded. We had to walk more than a mile to the gas station, buy one of those gas cans to fill up that way. Looks like we made it. I remember being not very happy. But yeah, that day when we got to California, he was still driving, of course, because it was his car, he wanted to drive. And it was raining, and he was still driving like 80 to 85 around some of the mountains where they get really sweepy. I was like, dude, we're gonna get in an accident. I think it's best that we slow down a bit. It's wet conditions. And I made it a point to never ride passenger with him ever again. Oh no, maybe we can't even get to Garage 10. Dude, that's funny.
Alright. That's it. We're out of fuel.
Low engine oil as well on the screen. Alright, how does this work? I'm at 10. Do I stop now?
We're out of gas.
Alright, we'll just reset, whatever.
Right here.
Alright guys, that was fun. Catching that next one.